Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you doing today, Winnie?
I'm okay. How are you doing in Chicago?
Good, good. Well, thanks for giving me some time to talk today.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how about we start off with you telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so my name's Winnie and I'm originally from New Jersey, but I moved to London in 2002 because I thought it was a pretty cool city. So I've been abroad outside the US pretty much since then. So my whole adult life I've lived mainly in London, but also in the Middle East and Singapore.
Wow, that's great. That sounds like a really exciting journey. What made you want to travel outside the States, or just it was just part of your career?
I've just always loved traveling.
Yeah.
I like getting like different perspectives on the world and meeting different kinds of people. So I kind of fell in love with London. I'd been studying as a master's student in Ireland, and every time I came through London, I remember thinking this is an awesome city, and I'd like to live here. And yeah, I moved here. Now I have two passports.
Wow, that's amazing. Great. Well, you have a really unique journey, and I really appreciate the Stanford rape case piece op-ed you did. How about you tell us a little bit about some of your earlier experiences and what kind of prompted you to work in that arena?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the reason I wanted to participate in this kind of the experience website is just that a lot of everything I do now as a 37-year-old woman is very much affected by something that happened to me when I was 29. And I think I'm probably not the only woman out there that's kind of had this experience. So when I was 29, I became the victim of, unfortunately, very violent stranger rape, which kind of happened to me in the middle of a park, in the middle of the day. And it's one of those things you obviously just don't see coming. Like, nobody ever plans for that to happen to you. And it happened to me. And then I just ended up realizing, okay, this is major, and it's just completely turned my life upside down. So it took quite a few years for me to recover from that. And I guess 8 years later, you can say I am recovered. And yet at the same time, like, I know my life's never going to be the same as it was before that event, and that affects everything from my relationships now to whether or not I'm ever going to be a mother to whether or not I decide to freeze my eggs. So I mean, all the work I do now, I switched my kind of career working as a film producer to the work I do now, basically as an advocate and an activist and a writer around the issue of sexual assault and consent, because I just realized it's such a big issue. It affects millions of women out there, and we need to be talking about this a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I thought was so powerful about your Stanford op-ed, was some of your viewpoints as being a victim yourself and recovering from that. So I really appreciate you for even standing up and talking for women everywhere about that. Um, so what are your thoughts about freezing your eggs? And I know you were part of the Timeless piece
Yeah.
that happened in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of a bit more ambivalent about it than maybe some of the other women on the site. For me, I'm 37 and I'm single, like probably most of the women on the site. And so for me, I've always wanted at least the option of being a mother, but I guess because of what happened to me when I was 29 and the way that's affected the way my life has gone, effectively, where I am right now, I'm single, and I guess I saw egg freezing as an option to at least give myself the opportunity to be a mother, given that my life kind of hasn't gone the way I was hoping it to go. So I froze. I did a round of egg freezing at the end of March, and I ended up getting, I guess, 4 eggs as a result, which isn't like a huge result or anything. So I think I was a little bit kind of disappointed in that. And obviously, I have no control over how fertile my body is. That's one of the things about the egg freezing process and this whole issue that I think is maybe quite difficult for women to deal with. I only got 4 eggs. It was quite expensive. I obviously don't earn a lot of money at the moment because I'm an activist and a PhD researcher. So it ended up costing about like a third of what my annual salary is. So I was like, okay, that was expensive for 4 eggs.
Yeah.
So I think I just kind of realized, well, maybe I'll do another round or maybe not. So I'm not really sure. I'm kind of in this kind of halfway decision point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, do you want to talk about your experience while you were egg freezing, like going through the process of meds and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of straightforward. I had a lot of friends that had done it before, friends who were a few years older than me who had kept on saying, okay, you should freeze your eggs. So by the time I was, 35, and I was sort of still joking, I was already joking about, I'm going to freeze my eggs, sort of. And then I actually turned 37. I'm like, I really should freeze my eggs. So, and then I actually realized I was too old for some of the clinics in London, because some of the clinics were like, oh, we're actually only going to treat people that are 36 or under. So there was definitely a feeling of, okay, I've sort of missed the boat. Which again, as somebody that works so much on the issue of sexual assault, that it was quite hard, because it's difficult for me to, I mean, it's impossible for me to separate my life now from what happened to me when I was 29, because, if that hadn't happened to me, maybe I would have gone and had the career I wanted as a film producer, and, met somebody and been married and had kids by now. But it's impossible to say. I just know the life I have now as a result, and that life has led me to being where I am, knowing that, okay, at least for some clinics I've missed the boat and I'm too old to even freeze my eggs. So it's kind of been a difficult, I guess, journey in that sense, to realize that, your life's been affected that much by something which you absolutely had no control over. So I guess for egg freezing, it was a way of thinking, like, okay, can I have some control over at least this part of my life? So I had a few other friends that had recommended clinics. I went with one which had a good reputation. Frankly, I didn't actually have that good an experience with them in terms of customer service. Might just be because I'm American and I'm kind of used to having a certain sense of customer service. And then, so it was all quite sort of arbitrary, and the medication wasn't as bad as I was expecting. I obviously spent a lot of money on it, and I got used to injecting myself a few times a day. And then the actual egg collection happened on Easter weekend, so it's sort of thematically relevant,
Yeah, I remember when you posted about that.
Yeah, so I only got 4 eggs, so I kind of decided, like, okay, well, that's better than none, but it's not enough for me to feel like I have that insurance plan that everyone's talking about,
Exactly. Did you ever think about doing it in the States, or was doing it in the UK just immediately where you wanted to go?
Well, because I live here, and because it is sort of an involved process, in the sense that it's at least sort of like 2-3 weeks. You need to be over somewhere. I think it's a little bit cheaper in the UK than it is in the US. I decided to do it here just because I thought it was something I could just, do and kind of fit into my everyday life, rather than sort of making a big deal about it. Yeah, so.
Yeah, okay. Well, it sounds like, you're in this decision-making process right now about whether you'll maybe do another round or put it on the shelf for now. But at least you have something in the bank, right?
Yeah.
Would you recommend egg freezing to others, maybe an earlier age, or?
Yeah, definitely earlier. I mean, I think if and it's a tough thing, because I suppose the assault happened to me when I was 29, which is kind of when a lot of my friends were getting married, or that's when a lot of people meet their partners. And for quite a few years, I wasn't able to date. And right now, I'm so tired emotionally from the work I'm doing that I'm like, the last thing I want to do on go on a date. So for the years that I spent trying to rebuild my life were possibly years when, like, I could have been out meeting somebody, I suppose. And when I was actually earning a decent amount of money, which was when I was in Singapore and the Middle East, I was in these countries where, I didn't really quite have the stability to get the egg freezing done. So I didn't really take it that seriously as an idea before. And then, and so I definitely would have, I think at the time, I would have probably done it earlier, especially because I had more money at the time. But, I mean, that's kind of, you live and you learn, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, you're really an inspiration for women everywhere, and you may not realize that, but your work is super important. And it is. It really is important. And
I mean, thanks. It's nice to hear. I mean, I guess it's one of those things where, as a kind of empowered, independent woman, you don't want to let this incident dominate your life. I mean, I didn't even know this person. I was just kind of walking through a park, and and I still don't know the person, and I frankly never want to. But it's just a bit, and I think that's what made me realize, okay, this is really kind of completely unjust and unfair thing. That's another person, complete stranger, can come into your life, do this to you, and you have to deal with the consequences of it for kind of the rest of your life in ways that you never would have expected. So, like, immediately after the assault, I never would have thought, like, oh, is this going to affect whether or not I'm going to be a mother, 8 years down the road? And I've decided to make I guess a professional decision to work on this issue, but obviously kind of my salary's gone down quite a lot as a result. So that affects whether or not I can do another round of egg freezing. So it's kind of all these things where, you don't want that incident or that one person even to have that power over your life. And yet I have to admit that, my life now is very different from what it would have been if it hadn't happened to me. One of the reasons I wanted to freeze my eggs is like, there was this part of me that felt like, okay, that person doesn't get the choice to decide whether or not I'm going to be a mother or not, like that person doesn't get to make that decision. I get to make that decision. And yet, yeah, I don't know if I've made that decision. I don't know. I mean, it's still a work in progress, right? Life is a work in progress. So I think the decision to freeze my eggs was to try to mitigate the kind of power that person can have over my life. As much as you don't want to admit it, as women in the kind of 21st century, we like to think, we have control over our lives and we can do all these things. But, something can come out from left field and completely change the course of your life in ways you never expected, and in ways you aren't really equipped to deal with either, and in ways that our society isn't equipped to deal with or to address in a really honest way. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
No, that's a really good explanation. Well, do you have any advice for women that are debating and thinking about the topic, or maybe have been raped themselves, that you would give to them?
Yeah, I mean, if you yourself are a victim, don't keep it to yourself. You should tell. I mean, you don't necessarily. It's up to you if you want to go the criminal justice route. I mean, there's a lot of problems with, as we can see with the Brock Turner case, there's a lot of problems with the way that the criminal justice system handles rape and sexual assault. So that is a different decision from whether or not you're going to tell somebody. But tell someone you feel like you can trust, and a lot of the research I've been doing, because obviously I'm a PhD researcher on this topic now, is that some of the most damaging things is actually after a woman has been raped, they'll tell somebody, and that person will kind of say, "Oh, did that really happen?" Or "You're just making that up," or
so like undermine it, or say it was your fault in some way.
Yeah. So all the kind of ways that all the victim blaming that people talk about, like even somebody close to you can ask questions where maybe they don't mean to say it, and maybe it's just because it's so difficult for any of us to consider that or to conceive of the fact that something like this can happen completely out of the blue, completely unjustified, in a world where we think we get what we deserve, or in a world where we think that if you do this, good things are going to happen. That doesn't necessarily happen, right? So it's difficult for people to confront the fact and accept the fact that somebody can do this and completely upend your life. So oftentimes people don't react in the best way when somebody tells them their story, and that can be really hurtful for the victim. But just because somebody does have that reaction doesn't mean that it didn't happen to you, and doesn't mean that it doesn't have that effect on you. So sometimes you do have to kind of find the right community. There's a great community online, obviously, of other survivors that kind of share their stories, provide support for each other, and there's obviously there tend to be resources like kind of support, like support therapy groups and counselors. So I guess if it's something that's happened to you, like, don't keep it to yourself, but also know that sometimes our society isn't as equipped to deal with the story as well as we should be. And then also it is a constant battle, but you're not alone, because there's lots of other women, just even in the course of this conversation, there's lots of other women who have experiences that are similar. And I think if we started talking about it more, then we'd realize how common our experiences are, and how much it's not just down to us as individuals making the wrong choice, but actually down to like our society kind of allowing a rape culture,
condoning it.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, the crime is a lot more widespread than we'd like to think it is. I mean, most of the statistics say that somewhere between 15 and 30% of women have had at least an experience of an attempted rape, which is huge. And you don't have to actually be a victim of a completed rape to deal with consequences. If even if somebody attempts that to you, like there are big psychological consequences that can last for years. So if anything, actually, this is a public health issue that we just don't acknowledge as such, because often women don't talk about it because they're afraid of being judged, and unfortunately, like, society does judge women that come out with these stories. I mean, how many women had to come out against Bill Cosby for him to be taken seriously as a perpetrator, right?
Right.
So the thing is, obviously, if it does happen to you, like, you're not alone, and there's a community out there that can support you. And the other thing is, it is a constant battle for me. Maybe battle's too hard a term, but it's like every day I have to confront this issue in some ways. And I think many survivors are like that. And a lot of times when you think you've kind of gotten to a point in your life and you've recovered and things are great, it can come back. So there's always
like
going to be
triggers.
Yeah, triggers. There's always going to be a certain kind of sadness and things that you don't really expect. I mean, I know, I've been interviewing victims of child sexual abuse and who were very young when they had crimes perpetrated against them, and they can't go, they can't get pap smears because that triggers them.
Mm,
Even a woman I know doesn't go to the eye doctor because being dark in a dark room with an older man will trigger her and cause trauma. So there's all these like small like lived experiences of the impact of these kinds of crimes that we don't really talk about. I mean, here in London, they've recently opened a clinic for victims of sexual abuse, so they can get kind of the gynecological treatment they need in a way that's more sensitive to them.
yeah.
And that involves like maternity, sort of a maternity ward as well.
Oh, wow.
And it's really important to recognize that if you have an experience like that, it can affect the way you think about doctors. And the way, I mean, it wasn't pleasant for me to get the egg freezing done, and
Yeah.
it's not something we really see, and that's why I think the Stanford survivor's story was so important, because that was, full over 7,000 words where she showed all the different ways in which her life has been impacted by that crime.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think she's a brave woman
yeah.
and out there helping others without even knowing it. So, and so are you. So it's great.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Well, we really appreciate you sharing your story and wish you all the best as you decide maybe to freeze again or not to freeze or
Yeah.
whatever. But we appreciate you. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks a lot. I mean, and I wish the project all the best, because I think it's important to hear just different stories and voices out there.
yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for talking.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks. Okay, bye.